Welcome to Unlock 360, the podcast for champions of public education. Here we explore the connection between leadership, teaching, and learning and reveal the keys to getting better results for all students. Each episode highlights a change maker who's turning vision into action and creating schools where both educators and students thrive. Welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, Wendy York Davoud, and joining us today, we have another guest from the beautiful state of Colorado, Superintendent Scott Nielsen of Weld RE5J School District. Welcome, Scott.
Thanks, Wendy. Excited to be here. Looking forward to a great time with you this morning.
Yeah, I'm so excited to chat with you and learn more about your district. Scott, will you start us off with just a brief introduction of yourself?
Sure. Well, Wendy, this is for me 32, 33 years in education. And as I ended my high school career, not a chance that I ever think I'd be an educator. Mom was one, lots of educators in the family. And the last thing I want to do was follow in those footsteps. But right after, when I was in my first year of college, I got asked to go back and coach in my hometown. So I started coaching soccer and at the high school level, and there was a bug. As soon as I started doing that, realized that I really enjoy influencing others. Coaching gave me an avenue. I then moved to added basketball and shifted to become a teacher. My first job was a special education para. I was a one-on-one with a really challenging student, and it was fascinating how much that influences me even today. The little things I learned, but I moved from that to a special education role, working in a facility in Colorado where all the students had been kicked out of Denver public schools. What we needed to do to connect with students, and it needed to be individual. I was a special education teacher in Fort Collins for 10 years, moved to the building level. I was an AP. I was a principal for 9 years of a middle school. And then I went to assistant superintendent where I oversaw all the secondary schools. I had 17 schools, about 17,000 students, and oversaw all that in athletics. And then the last 3 years I've been in 5J and the superintendent here, where I oversee 8 schools and but just one high school, one middle school. So the ability to connect and be part of the action is pretty cool.
Absolutely. And, I think it is so cool that you started out with, in special education. I don't know that I've had many guests, who serve as superintendents or even assistant superintendents that have special education backgrounds. So this is really cool. I love this.
When I think about leadership and I think about influencing the work I was doing, even starting as a coach, you're influencing individual players. You're looking for strengths. You're trying to modify opportunities, but you're constantly looking at strengths. The same thing happens in special ed. And I remember early in my career when I would do IEP meetings. I'm a strength based person. That's what I'm looking for. So my IEP meetings, when I'm talking about any student with their parents, I'm starting with strengths. And early in my career, hearing parents say, "This is the first time that we've heard good things," and I so much of the meetings were focused on the things we got to improve, and that really drives how I lead even to this day, right? Is I really want to find things that are be assets for people, and then there's always opportunities. My gosh, I got more opportunities to fix than most, but I also have strengths I bring, and everyone else does too. So finding those, and that's something I really learned working in the one-on-one individualized special ed world.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, and I'm reminded again of something my mentor taught me early on in my teaching career. It was like, reaching out and starting with positive when you make contact with families. And I'll never forget calling one shortly after moving to Southern California and taking a position as a junior high school teacher. And I was teaching a large group of kiddos that were really, really struggling. And the very first thing I did once I had my class roster was start reaching out and just connecting with parents or guardians. And one phone call, I'll never forget, his little boy's name was Marcus. I called and mom said, "What do you do now?" And I was like, "Oh, no no, ma'am. I'm just introducing myself and telling you what a pleasure it is to have him in my classroom," and she was shocked. So, I really appreciate that, and isn't that something that most families would say, "This is different." We don't usually hear the positive.
And clearly they're on an IEP because they have some gaps that we're trying to fill, but
Sure.
they all bring positives to the equation. And
Yeah.
That's true now, and I think about my role today of all the adults I get to work with and lead. Right now I'm working with such a talented group of humans, and they make the magic happen every day. All of them bring different assets to the team.
Yeah, yeah, okay. And so let's talk about that. For the audience, Weld RE5J School District serves approximately 4,100 students. As Superintendent Nielsen mentioned, they have 8 campuses, and they also serve 2 communities with their work. And I'm thinking about stepping into when you stepped into the role as superintendent. What was it like? What did you learn about the district? Where were you?
Well, first of all, I mean, like I said in my intro, right? I came from a big district, so and in a big district, things are slow. Everything took a long time. The influence, I had 17 or 18 principals and 30 some assistant principals, and so just even a meeting where I was trying to influence a group was large. I get together and I've got 7 principals so I've got a team that I can get together and we can learn from each other. But that first year when I got here, what I knew was the community had said, "Here's what we really want. We really want opportunities for our students to see themselves in work after high school, and we want
Okay.
those things happening for them in elementary, middle, and high school." And that was really exciting for me because that's a passion of mine. Right? Is how do we bring people's passions and intersect those with learning? And so it was exciting to see. But then I got here and had to try to feel out what was going on in each building. Um, one of the things I learned early on was we had one of our elementary schools, our Title I elementary school, was not on a performance or was not rated a performance school. So that was an early conversation. Okay, so how do we, as we're going to do some listening and learning, we have some emergent needs. We can't
Yeah.
say not as a performance elementary school, and I thankfully had a principal and leadership team at that building that were hungry to move it. And so we that year, as we're doing some of our work, we're also doing a little bit more intense work that ultimately has led to some really cool things across the district and allowed that school that was probably not looked up to in our district is leading lots of things and having other districts interested in the practices going on in that building. And they have been on performance now the last couple years with some large jumps in outcomes for kids. So it's been really neat to see that influence.
Yeah, okay. Will you, shed some light for our audience on the state accountability system? We have had one other guest on, this season or last season from the state of Colorado, but it's a little bit different. Will you share, when you mentioned performance, I think
Yeah,
you may have
so
said improvement.
performance is what you want to be, right? I would say performance is green, and then below performance, we have a yellow rating and a red rating. And when I got here, our school was 2 rungs below performance. So
Okay.
ultimately, to jump 2 performance categories in 1 year happens a little bit, but doesn't happen often.
Sure.
And so, and the energy that created was awesome.
Yeah.
Also, say, Wendy, I think one of the things that's fascinating for me, or has been fascinating in my leadership journey, is how much energy teachers put on the rating by the state. And we really, in this district, have worked hard to try to say, teachers, don't worry about that. That's me that has to worry about that. We'll worry about what's going on that matters day to day. On some level, that's the coach in me, right? Is it's awesome to win the last game, but in order to win the last game, I got to win each moment. I got to learn what's going on in practices, and so we have created some systems in the district, and that school I talked about has led the way in taking. I would say our learning communities have been in place prior to me. That's something our district has done well in terms of the use of time, but the work we were doing in learning communities might not have been moving the needle. And so we've really tried to, I'd say, simplify what we're asking our kids to do in the time together. But we've also asked them to own a group of kids instead of 4 individual teachers having 4 groups of kids. Our third grade team owns third grade. And so they're talking about, and they're using a couple simple protocols to make sure there's clarity about what we're asking kids to do that were monitoring what they're doing and that they were coming back and thinking about as adults, how do we respond when they are not able to do the things we're asking them to do? And so that that Title I school led that charge. And I remember very vividly my conversation with the principal at that school my first year here, and she was hungry to move. And I was like, "We're asking a lot of teachers to make this, so let's make this change gradual." And she's like, "Scott, I want to go faster than that." So she did, and she was absolutely right. She led it, and she allowed for a couple grade levels to dig in, and then had other grade levels fishbowl and watch what was happening in these grade level meetings. And all of a sudden, not only do we have other grade levels wanting to do it, but we had other schools from our district wanting to fishbowl with our third grade or our kindergarten in the school that was historically our lowest performing school. And now those practices are in all of our elementary schools and starting to infiltrate our secondary schools, which is pretty neat. And it's teachers asking for it. It's not the superintendent saying, you will do these things. Um, but alongside that, Wendy, what's been really neat is how do we celebrate it?
Yes.
And there's been some cool leadership moves that I've watched our principals do, help them think through how do we celebrate the success those teachers are having. And so if you think about a unit or a cycle that teachers may be working on around standard 3.1, when they get done, they've got pre and post formative data, and they're sharing their outcomes from from the pre to the post with their principals, who are then sharing it with me publicly, right? So they're letting the teachers see that we're celebrating those outcomes all the way through the system. And that's been pretty cool to watch, right? Is then the building teachers know that we're paying attention to how teachers are doing day to day. I'm not really I'm not talking to them about how they're doing on their MAT test in the winter or how they're doing on CMAS at the end of the year. I care about what you're doing day to day, because I know if you do that day to day, and if every day you move the kids, if you move them an inch every day, they're going to go a long ways over the course of the year. So that's been really cool. Highlighted ironically by one of the videos maybe that you had a chance to see. I was out at one of our elementary schools to film a video, and one of our coaches in that building came running up to me, and she said, Mr. Nielsen, I have something I got to show you." And she was carrying with her all the data they were looking at it as their end of the year data, and wanted to show me the growth across all their grade levels
That's
at
so cool.
the other schools. And that's not something I asked for, but
Yeah.
it was clearly something they were engaged in wanting to make sure that they shared. So that was neat to see that influence.
Yeah, I bet. And that just it just sparks joy, right? Like, that is so cool, and I completely believe that success breeds success.
Totally
So
does.
just yeah, to sort of see that campus, um, shift to performing in such a short amount of time, and, those practices that you're talking about are so powerful. Like, I wanna go back to something you mentioned around, you know, not focusing so much on the lag measure, the lagging outcome of the state rating, right? And
Yep.
rather shifting to the leads and the formative pieces and working on the day to day. It reminds me of Michael Fullen and Joanne Quinn's work on coherence and that component of securing accountability. And they speak to like no amount of external accountability matters in the absence of internal accountability. So it's really about that, focusing there, and the other will follow. Yeah.
It's interesting you say that because you're talking, for me, we've done a decent bit of work in early, even this summer. We did a large training. We brought all our leaders, including most from our facilities and custodial, and did some work with Covey around some of the wildly important goals,
Yeah.
but also with our principals, trying to stay away from, as Covey would say, the whirlwind. Right? Is how do you get stuck in the minutia? How do you simplify the things you're looking at?
Yeah.
And and I'm a firm believer in that. I don't do a lot of things well. So if I'm trying to do a lot of things, I'm not doing them well. But I will be a bulldog about how students are doing, what the outcomes look like for students, and what the opportunities for students are, because um, it creates opportunities for kids to feel like they belong in our system, but it also creates, um, the opportunity for teachers to see they can do more than they may have thought they could do. And so that's been really cool. You asked early, Wendy, about my first year, and as we were trying to move at one school, and that was really work with the one principal. We also wanted to work with all the principals. We had a community or a district where there had been some damage done culturally. There was some change, and there was an interim superintendent before me who did an awesome job about starting to repair some trust. But there was lack of trust in our district, and one of my firm beliefs around leadership, and this goes back to me as a middle school principal. I did culture pretty well, but I was not a very good instructional leader when I took over. I wasn't. I was a special ed teacher. I taught every subject, but I probably taught every subject mediocre to poor because I was out of my league. I didn't have high expectations academically for those students. I had high expectations for them behaviorally, but I didn't know how to have high expectations for them. So as I
Sure.
stepped in as a middle school principal, I really leveraged the teachers I had in the building to help me grow as an instructional leader. How do I grow my instructional chops? And so when I got into the superintendent role, I want to do the same for all our principals. And so one of the practices we still have today is we have two principal meetings a month. One of them is business. We do here. We learn together, but we do it at the central office. The second one we do at a building where we spend the majority of the time there in and out of classrooms.
Okay.
And then we discuss some pretty simple things. What are we asking students to do? Who's doing the work? Um, and are students are they engaged? Really those three things we started early on. We have students in this district, as many do, that generally do what we ask, but we don't always ask all students to do work that's going to move them where we want to move them.
Sure.
And so we started some of those visits the first year, and in some of my buildings, it was like, well, our teachers are nervous. We can only have 3 adults in a classroom at any one time, and so we had these parameters that I had to work with. And now the district don't care. They're totally good. 8, 9, 10 adults walk into a classroom. Teachers are comfortable with it. There's trust around it, and it really isn't even about trying to change the teachers as much as it is trying to grow our skills as leaders, to how do we continue to ask enough of students so they can make the growth we're asking them to make. We can have all the great strategies we want, but if what we're asking students to do is not enough to move the needle, the outcome will not change. And
Yeah.
and that really, as I think about the work that Title One school is, and that's really the big shift. They had great educators, loved on the students. They still love on the students, right? But they were working on this idea of warm demanding, and warm demanding requires you to love on your students, but you're also to have an ask
Yes.
that allows the students to move. And so that first year, and now our principals, they're much more open with each other. We'll get back in to have the dialogue at the end, and they'll talk about the great things they're seeing, and then they'll start to probe and ask questions about, you know what, in this classroom felt a little bit like um, maybe they weren't at grade level. Or maybe it comes out as, "Hey, I'm the high school I don't understand 3rd grade standards very well.
Sure.
Was that a 3rd grade lesson?" And then the conversation ensues. So it's been really powerful to watch the leaders step into that. And for me, I continue to learn and grow with it every time we do it. So that really has been a powerful practice for us.
Absolutely. It's a capacity building strategy for instructional leadership and a way to monitor progress and keep pushing the needle for kids. Yes. I love that so much. And it's very powerful. Absolutely. Really impactful work that every month, once a month, you all do.
Once a month, we're in a different building, um, there's still work around. I mean, last year in our retreat at the beginning of the year, like, okay, this year I don't I don't want a schedule because I don't want teachers to know that 8 people are gonna walk in at 10:35.
Yeah.
I want us to get to a place where we are comfortable and there's a little bit of pressure around adults could walk in at any time, and we should be asking enough of students so that we can grow. It shouldn't just be, um, it happens because I know the superintendent or other principals are gonna be in the room. It should be we're seeing authentic work. What's
Yeah.
happening there day to day. And we're close. We're not there in all our buildings yet, but it is amazing to see how much further along we are than I might have thought we would be when we started this work, and we were you can't have more than 2 or 3 people,
Yeah.
so nervous about, what's gonna happen, and they're gonna leave, and it's gonna be evaluative, and people are gonna not have all that stuff was clear
Shoot.
from our past practices, and so to build that capacity has been pretty neat.
It's so interesting that, um, as you shed light on where the district was and sort of the culture and, some of the distrust that may have been there. What's interesting is that I'm recalling a previous guest from another district in Colorado, and the timeline seems similar to kind of what they had experienced, and so I'm also just curious about what the tone was like at the state level maybe then, and how that may have influenced, school districts and the culture and within the school districts and where it may be now, and how that could possibly have a different influence. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, Colorado's interesting, Wendy, in that, when I talk to superintendents, I do some traveling and go learn from other superintendents in other states. Colorado um, is wildly independent, and
Okay,
so every district has its own everything. Um,
okay.
we even when you come down to graduation requirements, the district chooses their own essentially.
Really? Okay.
So, there's a couple staples that you have to have as a district. You got to teach a U.S. government class, and now there's some work-based learning requirements that are filling up around the edges. But in terms of how many English classes and how many math classes and what do they need to be, every school board gets to make those own decisions. We're also a school of choice state, so we are very competitive. Which, as an individual, that's how I roll. I want whatever district holding I'm in to be doing great, um,
Yeah.
attractive to the people we have because that means they feel good.
Imagine that, Scott, a former coach that
Yeah, right,
cares about
right.
competition. Yeah.
And charters, we have a lot of charters that have, I'd say infiltrated the public school system, and that has a lot of people stressed. In some sense, in a school of choice state, we're all charters. All have to create and build our culture and sell what we're doing, and you see that through some of the videos that
Yeah.
we're we're talking about the successes. We're celebrating what's going on, um, which I think when you mentioned it earlier, I'm a huge believer in success breeds success.
Yeah.
And I think back to some early conversations with our board here, and I have a fantastic school board, and my school board president is a Roosevelt graduate. So he's been in the community. Generations of his family have lived in the community. And so for him to talk early in my career about, what the district used to be perceived as and what he wanted to be perceived as, we aligned very well, right? We were both competitive, athlete, coach, individuals. So, uh, but one of the things I asked for was let's turn our board meetings into celebrations.
Okay.
You take a look at our website, you can see what we celebrated over the last year, and there's a tremendous amount of individuals, students and staff that end up in our boardroom celebrated for something that they've done, um, that's that's at a high level, whether it's athletic or academic, music, whatever those things are, and we can get better at that. That's an angle or an avenue for people to see. We're gonna call that out. Our board then, as soon as we started to do that, they created something tangible, and I think that's important, right? Is not only did you come, but they've got a coin now that they give to every person that comes as a token from the board, um, that for if you're a state champ, then it says you're the state champ. If it's something else, it's a thank you for representing the district.
Yeah.
And so that was cool for them to create,
That's so cool. Yeah.
coin. And then an early ask, which has been huge. As a principal, I have my own advisory. in my building. I had a student advisory group that I was fantastic for me, but I hadn't contextually thought about how do I do that at the superintendent level when I got here. It just wasn't on the radar. But my board asked for, or maybe two board members asked for us to think about student board members.
Okay.
And so we started to pursue that. We did some engagement with other districts that had already done that in Colorado, and in my second year, then we brought on two junior school board members, in with an intention of eventually getting to one junior, one senior, so that there's a 2-year term and there's all
Yeah.
experience and one new. So we brought on two juniors. Then last year we brought on another junior. So last year we actually had three, a junior and two seniors. And now we'll get to our rhythm this year where we have a junior and a senior. And it has been awesome to watch how student voice, you talk about influence. And so we have student voice now at the board level. I have taken the student board members and created a superintendent's advisory group in every school. But in reality, I'm only there. I lead or facilitate the high school one because my board members are in that group.
Yeah.
But all the other ones we have at all the elementaries and the middle school, those are facilitated by our student board members.
Okay.
So they're students talking to students, asking questions. We have a chance to talk about what interests are we going after today. Last year, we had done some work around our lunchroom and food and service because we outsource it. So we gathered feedback all over the district about lunch, and the students got to see the influence they had over the meals and what was served and how we do samples and things we didn't do before, and it all came from student voice. That's at the superintendent level, and now you're starting to hear people talk about student voice everywhere. And neat to see again its influence. I
Yeah.
haven't told anybody you have to think about student voice. I'm just modeling it, and even um, the superintendent's advisory. I sit in the meeting. So do I. I have the building principals sit in each one also. So the feedback, um, where I have talked to other superintendents and the feedback comes to me, and then I have to pass it back down to the principal with with my filter in some sense.
Yeah.
The principals right now are getting that raw information just like I am. And in reality, they're the ones making the change in their building, not me. Um, and so there was uh, one of the sessions we had at an elementary close to the end of the year, and I had 10 things on my calendar, so I couldn't go to that. And my inclination was to say to the principal, "You don't have to have that today," and she did it anyways, and it was awesome. You're starting to see they see the power in it, and so again, Wendy, that there's nothing special in that other than we're celebrating and giving a chance for students to share, and then when they see they have their own influence, they're leading the district just like we are.
Yes. That's so cool. I love that. Very powerful stuff. Giving them a voice, letting them, have some voice and influence, and, they may not always be able to make the final decision or get it their way, right? But they get to be heard, and
Yeah,
that expresses value.
totally. A funny story, you say they may not always get we were talking at one of the elementaries about what do they wanna have at lunch?
Yeah.
That was one of the things the student board members had asked, and one of the students was like, "I'd love to have some lobster and,
Yeah.
crab legs," and well, that might not fit. But, again, interesting just to hear, what people are asking for.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, so Superintendent Nielsen, I think pretty cool to hear where the district was, some of the wonderful things you're doing now. Where are you headed? What is the vision for, the future in Weld RE5J school district?
Nice job, buddy. Trust me, I struggle with that still. So, well, I'll just say to you as I've moved through my world, right, 5J, um, we will continue to stay simple and focusing on what are we asking students to know and be able to do. And that's a funny thing, right? Is DeFore asked us to think about that, I don't 25 years ago now, or
Right?
um, but I watched a lot in my career us miss on that, right? Is we we talk about that and then we measure it at the end of the year. So all the things I talked about earlier, we will continue to do. And those practices, as I said earlier, are beginning to infiltrate at the middle school and at the high school. And those practices have been difficult at the high schools that I've watched in my career,
Yeah.
some of the practices. So we're going to push on that and continue to challenge that our students, they have high expectations, and it's
Right.
everybody. It's not just for our high performance students. So one of the things we'll continue to measure is who is sitting in our high level classes. How is that changing over time? Because we're still sorting and selecting as we go through our school. And if you look at our high school and um, but our district has asked for work-based learning opportunities. Our voters, our community was super supportive with a bond in 2000 that allowed us to build a state-of-the-art high school. The high school we have now, for a high school of 1,200 or 1,300 rivals any high school I've been in terms of access that students have to authentic passion-based learning.
In 2000 or 2020?
2020, sorry, Wendy, thanks for correct 2000, long time ago. 2020, yes. So
It's so okay, I have to just say this is burn walk, but I after relocating from Southern California to, back home to Fort Worth, Texas, one of the hard things about big moves like that is, you finding new doctors and, service providers, right? And so found a doctor, was seeing him for the first time, and he asked, when my last checkup was, and I said 2000. And a little bit later on in the visit, I was like, "Oh, no, sorry, that I meant 2020." So I don't know why
yeah,
that
I
is,
don't even
but
know why that rolled off. Yeah. What, 6 years ago? The
yeah.
high school's been open now for 3 years,
Okay.
um, and we continue to show huge expansion in the concurrent enrollment slash work-based learning opportunities our students have access to. And we'll
Awesome.
continue to grow those. But thousands of opportunities now where if you go 5 years ago, it was in the hundreds, low hundreds. So
Wow. Yeah.
dramatic change in what students have access to. We still have opportunities to help kids belong. Uh,
Sure.
you know, we push hard to help every student, really every staff member feel like they're a part of the 5J family. And there's still students that, for whatever reason, aren't present enough, don't feel like we're providing um, access. And so we will continue to work on that. Um, if I think back to that first year, I started as a para in Minnesota.
Okay.
One of the things that was fascinating to me was the individual I was working with was refusing to do everything. This is a ninth grade student that I was one on one with.
Okay.
So, I'm watching what was happening with this individual, and he would go to classes and he would be a class clown or, you know, a jerk, teachers would say.
Okay.
He'd go to the special ed room where they had built this mat wall around him where he had his own independent space, and that tore me up to watch. There was no place this kid belonged, and I couldn't get him to do anything. And I'm 21 or 22
Yeah.
snapper who thought I had all the answers by it. So at one point, I finally said to this youngster, I said, what are you interested in?" And he told me he's essentially it was a motorhead at 13 or 14, and I wasn't. But I ended up asking our special ed teacher at the time. I said, "Hey, look, can I have enough money so I can buy a lawnmower motor?" And what I ended up doing with this individual is I said, "Look, we're going to do X amount of reading," because he was a ninth grader who didn't read. So we're going to do some reading practice. We're going to work on our reading skills, and then I want you to show me how to take apart this motor and put it back together. And it was like a light switch. It was the most fascinating thing I've ever seen. He was
Yeah.
so engaged with me, and that individual who now works in an automotive place. That's what he does for a job. Um, but it blew my mind the skills he had that I didn't have. And so I still think about that all today, right? Is how do we bring passion driven opportunities to students in the classrooms, outside the classrooms, but associated with the schools? And that's, music does it well, but doesn't reach everybody. Sports does it well, but don't reach everybody. We do, competitive robotics that we have students that was a niche that we weren't feeding. We're doing a good job with now. We have an ag community that we're doing an awesome job with. But we'll continue. That's an area to continue, Wendy. Is how do we connect individuals that are struggling with their passions? How do we bring those in so that they have a place? And that's an area we'll continue to work on.
That's wonderful. Scott, where can someone go if they wanna learn more? It just sounds like a really exciting, fun place to be. If they wanna look for a new place called home, district to enroll their kiddos, or even, a new place to teach and serve in a leadership role, where would they go to learn more?
You know, our website is weldre5j.org. So they go there. We have a good presence in social media, Facebook page, Weld RE5J Facebook. We tell the story there, a lot of what we're doing. Um, and I mean, come visit. We are in Colorado right now. It's pretty unique because we have a tremendous amount of districts in the state of Colorado are shrinking, and we are not. We're one of the fastest growing districts in the state of Colorado, and
Exciting.
community that's growing, but school district that's growing. And for a lot of years, we were a district where we're losing our own students to school districts around us. Now we're bringing our school students back, but we're also attracting students from other districts to come see what 5J is about. So it's pretty neat. It's a pretty cool place to be. And we have a tremendous amount of group of adults that are doing the work I just talked about.
Yeah, yeah, okay, great, thank you so much, and then last but certainly not least, I wanna give you a chance to shout out to give a special appreciation to just to recognize and honor someone, who's had a positive impact on your career as an educator or an educational leader.
Wendy, it's fascinating to think about because I've been lucky to have so many individuals who have poured into me. But I'm gonna go a direction that at the beginning I might not have thought about. Um, when I started as a principal at Preston Junior High in Fort Collins, Colorado, I had only been an assistant principal for 1 year, and so I was ill-equipped to be the principal at the time. And my assistant principal, John Howe, was an incredible partner. We were partners for 9 years. He had been a principal in Wyoming. He was assistant principal at Preston for 14 or 15 years. Um, but he helped create a thriving middle school, but he also helped me to learn to be a leader. So I just say my partner, John Howe, who we again partnered for 9 years at Preston Junior High, then slash middle school, and had a tremendous amount of success as a middle school in Fort Collins and created something that was pretty fantastic and couldn't have happened without him.
That is so cool. John, I hope you are listening and maybe even, some of your family members because you deserve that recognition. That's very cool. Thank you, Superintendent Scott Nielsen. It's been an honor having you on the show today.
Thank you, Wendy.
All right, everyone, that's a wrap. Until next time. Thank you for joining us on Unlock 360. If this conversation sparked new thinking, share it with a colleague and keep the dialogue going in your school district. Public education is complex work, and progress happens when leadership and teaching move together. I'm Wendy York Davoud. Until next time, keep building the systems that unlock what's possible because strong leadership drives deeper learning.